Welcome back to Keeping It Classic, Townsend Harris High School's official student-run podcast. We're your hosts, Nanama Kwarteng and
Danielle Mitchell, presenting you with episode 3 featuring Mr. Condon.
He has been the principal at Townsend Harris High School since 2017. In this episode, we ask him 5 major questions which relate to his job as principal, details about his job, how stressful it is, the biggest challenges, and the greatest accomplishments of being a principal. So tell me, Mr. Condon, how is your job as principal?
Oh, I think it's the best job in the world. I wouldn't want to do anything else. So, yeah, it's great.
Can you go into detail about what jobs the principal does specifically and what you oversee?
So the simple answer is everything. Everything comes through the principal's office. It makes a lot of stops along the way, but it comes through here, and I sign off on everything, and I'm responsible and accountable for everything. Buses, books, boilers, you name it, your schedules, your graduation, your college recommendations, you name it. Whatever's happening here at Townsend Harris comes through my office before it can be done. So it's a large job. What are the things I oversee? Like I said, it's everything. The principal's job so the title really is principal teacher. That was the original title. So it was the principal teacher of the school was what has now become the principal. In the last 30, 40 years, it's become a little bit more of an administrative job than a teaching job. But for me, because I'm a natural teacher, I make it more a teaching job than an administrative job. So I spend a lot of time with the teachers, talking about teaching, sort of giving them my thoughts on teaching. I spend a lot of time in classrooms watching teaching. So if you hang around long enough, you'll see me a bunch of times in your classes, and often I'm talking to kids and taking notes and writing reports and helping teachers grow and become better to make sure that the students have the best experience they can in the school.
How stressful would you say your job is?
Well, I mean, all jobs are stressful. I would say the stress ebbs and flows at different points of the year. So the most stressful time of year are times when we're doing budgeting, because we don't know what our budget's going to be next year until the end of this year. So you're kind of always fingers crossed that they're not going to change the formula and you're not going to lose money and there's not going to be some cut to education. That's probably the most stressful thing about the job, most stressful time of year. And then the rest of the year is, it has its moments. If somebody gets hurt, or something happens to a staff member or a student, of course, that's very stressful. That doesn't happen that often here, so I don't experience it that much. But I would say the largest stress that we have here, or I have as the principal, is around finances. So how do we do all of this on a budget that's not really designed to do all of this? And that takes a lot of thought, a lot of effort, and sometimes a lot of difficult choices. I can't hire this type of person, or I can't have this type of teacher. I have to, make a choice between this or that, because, a dollar can only be spent once, even in the magical world of the DOE. So, yeah.
What were the biggest challenges you've encountered as principal?
So I would say they were early on. It was culture. I always think culture is the hardest thing for a school, because after a while, people just sort of behave a certain way. It just sort of almost is ingrained in them, right? This is how they do things. This is the way we talk to kids. These are the rules we have. And when I first got here, I objected to some of the dynamics between adults and kids here. And normally in a school, most schools I've been in, I'm more upset with the way the students behave towards the teachers. Or the adults, shouldn't say the teachers, towards the adults. And what sort of got my attention here was, well, the students, there's no issues with the students, right? Like, we don't have a lot of issues that other schools have, so why are we interacting with students the same way that they do at other schools when our students obviously are different? So for some people, they had been here for 30 years, and change is difficult, and when you bring change, you get some pushback. So I would say the most difficult time that I got here was right at the beginning, when I was making some culture changes around how the dynamics between students and adults, and also what I expected in the classroom. So I brought a different lens to look at teaching through. And it was, I think, it has proven to be beneficial, the changes we've made in the classrooms. Like, you didn't see them because when you were here, we had already established the way we teach. But prior to that, it was very traditional, sort of like stand and deliver teaching. Take a lot of notes and not as much interaction. It was sort of a lot of memorizing, and all of that's good and important. But we've moved towards a more student-centered approach. So I would say this: when I got here, the majority of teaching I would classify as teacher-centered. Right, the teacher was at the center of the learning, and that's not bad. It's just sort of the way things were. And what we have now is student-centered learning, student-led, right? So to me, good teaching is student-centered, document-based, and discourse-driven. And what that means is the students do most of the intellectual work in the classroom. So the teachers select documents and develop questions and paths of inquiry that require the students to be active learners, not receivers of knowledge, not receivers of information, but active seekers of knowledge, right? So they engage in inquiry-based, which is all document-based, and the way they do that is through discussion or discourse, whether it's discussion in the classroom or a lot of writing back and forth with the teacher or colleagues about what it is you're learning about. And that's much more aligned with what you see in college than what than what you would see in most high schools. So you're actually more prepared for college, sort of following our pathway, because you become more independent. Right, you don't need the instructor in the front of the room telling you things. You learn how to find things out yourself. So I think our teachers have done a wonderful job of that. I think our classrooms are dynamic and fun and interesting, and you get a lot out of them. And the proof in the pudding is when people come back from their first year of college, they tell me that college was easy compared to Townsend Harris, that we actually prepared them well for the experience at Princeton or Yale or Binghamton or Stony Brook or St. John's or wherever people may go. So, but that was probably the most difficult thing for me. And it's hard to be the new guy, right? Like, it's always hard to be the new guy. So think when you were a new student, but there were like 300 of you when you were a new student. So you weren't like the new person. You were one of 300 new people. Imagine being the one new guy. And I came in May, so May 1st, 2017, so the end of the school year. There was only a month and 2 months left. So imagine that. Imagine starting with, only 2 months left in the school year. It's, and there had been some trauma here. There had been some discord here, and people didn't know what they were getting. They were scared that there would be a repeat of what had happened prior to my arrival. That, what would the relationship be like with the principal? Would it be productive or would it be contentious? And I think overall, most teachers here, and I mean the vast majority, almost all, would tell you that we have a collaborative and productive work environment, and one that's actually kind of happy and joyful. I feel like that word's been overused in public lately, joyful, like it seems to be all over politics. But I do think when you walk in our classrooms, there's a sense of joy on the teacher's side and the student side, and that's wonderful. So.
What are your greatest accomplishments as principal?
Oh, I don't think of those things. I'm not really an accomplishment person. I don't have a list of things. I mean, you would know whatever the World News and Report, whatever that is, the report from World News and Report's rankings. Like, we've had some good rankings over the last few years. Like, we've been the top school in New York State a couple times, and we've been ranked very highly nationally several times now, which is nice. That's more for you guys than it is for me. I would say the accomplishments are just that when students respond to the surveys, that generally they seem happy. When they come back from college, they tell me that we prepared them well, and they tell me they enjoyed their time here. And those are the things I really look for as accomplishments. I'm not a person who looks at rewards we get all sorts of accolades. There's from the state, from the city, we get all sorts of accolades, but really what matters most is that when my students leave here, they're grateful for the time here, even though it was imperfect, right? Like they understand, like, we don't get everything right, but we're pretty good, I think. So, yep.
Thank you for offering us an insight into your job as principal.
Sure.
And we're glad to have you back.
Well, I'm glad to be back.
This concludes episode 3 of Keeping It Classic. We're your hosts, Kwarteng and
Danielle Mitchell.
Signing out.
Preserving the past, inspiring the future. Catch you next time on Keeping It Classic.